This is the tutorial for Chapter 22 in your Beginning AutoCAD workbook. Okay, so Chapter 22, it says our objectives are to draw an arc using 10 different methods and to dimension arc segments. So in the introduction, it says there's 10 different ways to draw an arc in AutoCAD. Not all of the arc options are easy to create. So sometimes you might find it easier to trim a circle or to use the fillet command. When you're doing drawings, you'll probably only use a couple of these methods. So which ones you use will depend on the application or what information you already have. So we're not going to go through all 10, but let me show you some of them. So your arc command is on your draw panel. So we have 3 points. Then the order that these are listed in are the order that you click your mouse. So you can click for this one where you want it to start, where you want the center to be, and where you want it to end. The next one you can do start, center, angle, then start, center, length. The next section of them you could do where you want it to start, where you want it to end, and what angle, where you want it to start, where you want it to end, and what direction, where you want it to start, where you want it to end, and what radius. And the third set of them is you pick your center point, then the start and the end, the center point, the start and the angle, the center point, the start and the length. So for arcs, we have center, start, and end. We have angle, length, direction, and radius. So depending on what information you already know, you're going to pick the best way to create your arc. The ones that I tend to use the most are the 3-point arc and start, end, direction. So let's just do a couple of these. I'll just show you a couple. So let's do our 3-point arc first. So I'm going to click where I want it to start, where I want the second point or the middle point of the arc to be, and where I want it to end. So start, center, or middle, sorry, and end. That's the one that I tend to use the most. Let's look at start, center, and end. So I'm going to click where I want it to start. Let's say I want the center of it to be over here. Actually, instead of just doing it randomly, let me turn on my end point so that I can show you. Okay, start, center, end. So let's say I want it to start over here. I want the center of it maybe to be on the corner of my border. And then where do you want it to end? If I wanted it, see how it's, I had to turn my F8 off so I can click where I want it to end. But if I only wanted a little section, arcs are drawn counterclockwise, so from the left around. If I wanted it going the other way, I would have to hold down my control key while I'm drawing my arc. So I'm just going to say I want it to end there. So remember that too. Remember about your control key. Start, center, and angle. Let's say I want it to start over here on the left. I want the same center, and I want an angle of 30. Could do the same thing again, where I want it to start, where I want the center to be, and this time I'm going to say minus 30 for my angle. Okay, so it's going to go the other direction. The other one, the one that, like I said, that I use mostly, so I use 3-point. Oops, sorry, my mouse is being difficult here. So start, end, and direction. And I find I tend to use this one if you're drawing. I don't know why, but it seems to be when you draw doorways, this is the one that gets used the most. So start, end, and then which direction you want it to go in. Start, end, and radius. That one gets used sometimes. Start, end, and radius. I'm just going to try putting in 2. No, it didn't like 2. Start, end, so just depending on what area you're trying to put an arc into, what start points you have, or what information you might know, pick the best one. I'm just going to draw one more here for a second. I'm going to turn my F12 back off. There is this one at the bottom that you might use sometimes. Continue. So it creates an arc tangent to your last one. So if I went in here, I'm just going to draw a line for a second. Okay. So if I go into arc continue, it's going to draw, whether it was a line I had drawn before, whatever I drew last, it's going to draw an arc tangent to whatever I had drawn before. So you might use that one sometimes. The last thing, zoom all just isn't working on my mouse today. The last thing is dimensioning arcs. So I have 2 arcs here. So under your dimension tool, you have arc length. So you just pick your arc. Oh, I'm going to go to my dimension layer first. Just pick your arc and then click where you want the text to be. Same thing over here. Pick your arc and just click where you want your text to be. You might notice that in our dimensions, so see how on this one our extension lines are radial, so they're at an angle. On this one our extension lines are in orthographic, they're just straight up and down. That's because if your arc is over 90 degrees, it'll put them at the angle. If your arc is under 90 degrees, it'll put them straight up and down. This little symbol, this hat or cap, that tells people that dimension is the length of that arc. So if you took that arc and straightened and flattened it out, that's how long it would be. If for some reason you wanted that little cap in a different position, just want to see if we can do them one by one, or if we have to go into our properties for the whole thing to do it. Yeah. So you can't do individual ones. It has to be the same style for your whole drawing, which makes sense. So you would go into Dimensions, your Style Manager, Modify, Symbols and Arrows, then your arc length symbol. So right now, ours is set as preceding the dimension text. You could also say above it, or you could say none. So if I changed it to above, it's going to move it up there. That's about it when it comes to dimensioning arcs. Don't think that there's anything else in there. Oh, they do mention. So if you had a drawing and inside your border, let's say you had a really big arc. So for whatever reason, I don't know what your drawing is, but let's say you had an arc. So trim. Let's say you had this arc inside your border. So it has a radius of 10.491. So if you tried to dimension that radius, if you tried to dimension your radius, so you could do this, but you don't know where your center is. If you wanted it to dimension to the actual center mark for some reason, if you had that turned on, because it's way down here, our center mark is way out here. So what you would really do is you would put your dimension, and this is when you would use your jog command. So you would select your dimension, click where you want it to be, where you want that jog to go. So that's how you would dimension an arc that has a center mark that's way far away, that you don't want a big extension line running across your drawing. Just use that little jogged. Okay, so then exercises 22A through to 22L. 22L. It gets you to practice all the different ways of drawing arcs. And then 22M is your assignment. Okay, so that's the end of the tutorial for chapter 22. That's the end of the tutorial for chapter 22.